So I presume you'd like me to conclude to the main, decision. The main decision is.
So hello beautiful people, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new, hello, hi, click that subscribe button, and for those of you that are already subscribed and returning, hello, hi, welcome back. As you can see from the title of this video, I am going to share with you my PhD Viva experience, what happened, what I went through, what was my responses like, and what you can expect if you are waiting to defend your PhD. So let's jump into it. So for those of you that do not know what a PhD Viva is or what I'm even talking about, a PhD Viva is literally the last stage of your examination for your PhD. This is where you orally defend your PhD before your external examiners. So another thing to note about a PhD Viva is that it comes at the end of your PhD submission. So it's actually the last thing that you do in fulfillment of your Doctor of Philosophy. Once you complete your PhD, you submit it for review to your external examiners. Now, your external examiners are basically examiners who you would have selected outside of your university, who are best suited to examine you on your topics or your theories that you've touched on. I would have worked closely with my two supervisors to pick my external examiners because I really wanted to go for examiners that understood my field of research, and that would give me really constructive criticism as well. So when I picked my external examiners, I actually focused on examiners who I would have cited their work within my PhD thesis and who I knew would really challenge me. So my two external examiners came from the University of Cambridge as well as the University of Holloway. Now, there are three types of results that you can get after your PhD Viva examination, and that is pass with no corrections, pass with minor corrections, and pass with major corrections. After submitting my PhD, it took almost 3 months for my external examiners to finally get back to myself and my supervisors and schedule my Viva. In that 3-month period of waiting while they are reviewing my thesis, I was really preparing for my Viva as well too. And something that happens, which I'm sure other PhD students who have done the Viva already might tell you, is that in that 3-month period of you waiting to do your Viva, there is so much new information that you're being exposed to, and you must understand as well that your field of research is developing even after you've submitted your PhD. So what I did in that 3-month period is I really started to get acquainted with where the research was going, what are some of the new types of insights that scholars are contributing to in that field, and really ensuring that my PhD contributions were still relevant to where the research was going from a contemporary standpoint. I also would have sharpened up my knowledge on my external examiner paper and making sure that I was very aware and that I was up to date with what my external examiner's views are on certain aspects of my PhD. So once I got the date for my PhD Viva, I actually took close to 2 to 3 weeks preparing for my PhD Viva, going through my arguments, going through areas that I thought were a little bit challenging, going through the papers of my external examiners, and I even had a session with my supervisors where they kind of asked me questions on certain areas and just really making sure that I was ready to defend my PhD on the day. I think what I really appreciated when it came to the exchange with my PhD supervisors is they said to me, listen Shelly, do not be too nervous about this, don't be too anxious about this. This is literally a conversation between yourself and experts in the field. They are not here to try to fail you. They are not here to try to ask you, some kind of question that has an ulterior motive to it. They just really want to understand your research, and this is probably the very few times that you would have somebody that has read your thesis from back to front. So, they were like, this is an excellent time for you to just enjoy it and to go in there talking about your research confidently and really believing in all aspects of the steps that you took in terms of your fieldwork, to your methodology, to how you've structured your thesis. Once I heard that, it really helped with quelling a lot of my nerves and my anxiety, because I just felt like, you know what, if there's anyone that knows my thesis best, it's me. I spent 4 years compiling the research. I spent 4 years really understanding this field. So if there's anybody to speak about it confidently, it's me. And if there's anybody to criticize it overly, it's me as well too. Now, one of the things to know is that my PhD Viva was actually held virtually. And this was because we were still in lockdown due to the pandemic. And I mean, do I regret having a virtual Viva? Not necessarily. I thought that it still went well, but I do think it requires a lot of your presence and your organization. So the night before I got ready for my Viva, I ensured that all the papers that I needed, because I knew that I would either draw from them or quote them, I ensured that they were printed, and I had like little sticky notes so that I'll know which page I needed to turn to. I also had a printed copy of my thesis nearby as well. So when the external examiner were speaking about a particular part of my thesis, or when they would ask me to turn to a certain page number, I knew exactly where I needed to go. I also didn't write too many notes inside of that document because I just did not want to be distracted. Another thing that really helped me in the preparation of my Viva is that I created a document which had sections of my chapters and key points for each chapter. So for example, chapter 1 would have been my introduction, and there were like key things that I wanted to ensure I remembered, or key things I wanted to say that I placed under each chapter. And that really helped, because when you go into your PhD Viva, most times your supervisors are present, but they can't say anything. They're not supposed to help you or speak or anything. It's really you defending your PhD, if it's truly you that did your research and it wasn't anyone else. So I think avoiding looking in your papers all of the time, or scrambling for different pieces of information to answer a question should be avoided, and you should really come to this space of familiarity with your work. And that's what I really worked on in that 3 months. I read over my PhD a number of times, and I just ensured that I knew my arguments inside out. So on the day of my PhD Viva, my table was set. I wore some very comfortable clothes. I was actually wearing this shirt. I wore some jeans. I ensured that I had water nearby, and my husband was present with me as well too. Before I went into my Viva, my husband and I prayed, and I just really asked for guidance to answer to the best of my ability, and that ability to also remember all that I have done and to just give of my best, because I knew that I had done 4 years of the work, and it was just really time for me to shine and to talk boldly and enthusiastically about the research that I did. So when I entered into the virtual room, my 2 external examiners were present. I had a chair who came from King's College London, and my supervisor. The external examiners, they introduced themselves, they talked about what they really liked about my research, and then they also highlighted what are some areas that they want to talk about and get more of my opinion on it throughout the Viva. Before I entered the Viva, my supervisor would have said to me that the Viva would probably last about 1.5 to 2 hours. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, my Viva lasted 4 hours. Yes, 4 hours of intensive intellectual probing, 4 hours of you thinking on your feet, 4 hours of you really being present. Now, some of you might be like, oh my god, your PhD Viva lasted 4 hours. I just want you to know that it's not always like that. This has just been my experience. The main reason I think my PhD Viva went for 4 hours is because I chose external examiners that were experts in the field and were examiners or scholars that I cited a lot in my PhD. So my PhD was actually furthering their work, and because of that, they were extremely invested in my contributions. They were extremely invested in wanting to know more about how I was pushing the needle of furthering knowledge in the field. And I think this is why, you know, the conversation just went on, and it could have gone on longer, because you start to see that your work is so intertwined into your external examiner's work, and literally that is just what academia is, right? You can go on and on and on talking about knowledge, but it was such an enjoyable experience. But would I recommend somebody looking at this to really get examiners like that, both examiners like that who you've deeply cited? Probably not. I think when you do that, it just opens the door for a lot of conversation and a lot of discussion and a lot of debate. And sometimes in your Viva, you don't really want that, right? But overall, I would say that it was such an enjoyable experience. Some of the types of questions that the external examiners asked, what they did is they went through chapter by chapter. And this is why I was so grateful that I had like my cheat sheet, which showed like what were my main points for each chapter. So they would have asked me questions around why did I structure my thesis in the way that I did. The questions that they asked me particularly around my methodology is why I chose the type of methodology I chose as compared to something else. Being very specific about what is your contribution. So for example, one argument that my external examiners had with regards to my theory was my choice of theory, and why did I use this theory as compared to next theory, and I had to really justify it. And that justification is where you show your understanding of these two different theories. So for example, with my study, they asked me why did I use triple helix model and not quadruple helix model. Thankfully, I understood both theories very deeply, so I was able to show why one was better than the other and why context was so important, especially for my research. Another thing as well that I realized in my Viva is that they want you to truly defend your PhD. So please don't go into your Viva thinking that every single thing that they say is golden. No, if they disagree with you, I think that that's absolutely okay. And there were instances in which, you know, they suggested something to me and I actually disagreed with it, because I said to them, from the research, this is actually what the research and scholars have been saying, and it's not really what they've kind of perceived it as. So it was a lot of back and forth, but I think that's healthy in a PhD Viva, because it demonstrates that you know what you're talking about, that you've done the research, that this is definitely your research, and that you have done the work to be called an expert in the field. One thing to note as well too with my PhD Viva is that there were areas that I did not have the answer to, and I didn't have the answer to it because my PhD's findings didn't go that far. So my findings couldn't cover some of the questions that they were asking, or it didn't reveal some of those findings that they were suggesting. And I think as a researcher, especially in your PhD Viva, don't say yes to things that your findings didn't show you. Remember, this is a Viva for you to defend your PhD and your findings. So in instances where they asked me something and I realized I didn't have the answer for it, or my findings didn't show it, I literally raised my hands up and I said, you know what, that's a good point, but it's not something that my findings have shown, or it's not something that my PhD thesis has covered, and because of that I am not in a position to answer it. What I can say is that the research in the field has shown this, and it is reasonable to expect this, but we can only know if further research is done, so that we can see the relationship between X and Y, right? So just do not oversell yourself, do not oversell your findings, do not exaggerate your findings, stay within your PhD's remit. Please remind yourself that your PhD is just a very small contribution to a large body of knowledge. So yes, we have all these like big plans and ambitions of what our PhD's contributions will be and how we can change things and all of that, but we must remember that knowledge is so boundless and so expansive that your contribution is just a very small part to, you know, this vast knowledge that is out there. So just being mindful of that. Now, once that 4 hours was done and I was finished with my defense, both external examiners asked me to remove myself from the room. They would begin their deliberations and talk about what they thought about my defense, and I would come back in and I would know the result. So it took about 20 to 25 minutes for them to come back with a result, and during that time I was just praying. My husband, he was so supportive. He kept saying to me, "You did an awesome job, you did so well, I'm so proud of you." But of course, you know, you're still questioning yourself. You know, did I say everything I needed to say? Did it sound right? Was I convincing? Was I persuasive? Did I miss out something? Like, I kept asking myself, you know, was it enough? And I think that's the thing with academia as well. Like, you never really know if it is enough, especially when you're in a space with 2 experts. So when they came back, I just said to myself, Lord, let it be minor corrections, because minor corrections means that you just have very small amendments to make, and that's it. And they usually give you like 3 months to do that. Major corrections means that you have up to 6 months, and then if it's not a pass, well, you just end up getting a master of philosophy and not a doctorate. So I was really, really, really hoping for minor corrections. And when they came back, I just said, you know what, let thy will be done. And you can see from this little snippet.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to read this great piece of work. I really, enjoyed reading your thesis. We both thought it's a well-organized, well-executed piece of work. You've collected an impressive amount of empirical data, and really, really interesting and very insightful in many places. I mentioned this very before time. I particularly enjoyed reading your comparison of 2 similar but subtly different universities. I think it's really an exciting chapter. So I presume you'd like me to conclude to the main decision. The main decision is it's a pass check, some minor revisions. So well done, congratulations. You also champagne this evening, but there are some minor areas in relation to conceptual clarity, and the suggestions are really to kind of enhance the quality of your thesis and help your publications as well.
My PhD is awarded with minor corrections. And even when I talk about it now, I still get emotional, because I just felt like finally I have done this. It is done. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for getting me to this spot and to this place. And I was just so happy. Like, I literally cried, yo.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It is because, it has been such a tough journey. It has been so tough, especially in my last year of writing up. Just being in quarantine and stuff, not feeling like I can see the end of the tunnel. So it's just, I'm just so grateful to be here, and I've also said this to my supervisor, how tough that last year was. 2020 was very difficult. So I'm just very grateful to be here.
And we can see the amount of work we put into it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just very, very happy. Tears of joy indeed.
It was unforgettable. It was really unforgettable, and it was truly emotionally fulfilling for me, and it was the most intellectually stimulating conversation I've ever experienced, right? And if you know me from following me, you would know that I love intellectual conversation. And in that moment, I felt just so fulfilled. I felt so aligned, I felt so alive, I felt so enthusiastic, and I hope for anybody that is experiencing their Viva that you have that experience too. And I don't think I've ever had that experience before, and I probably may never have an experience like that again. Now, once I received my results of pass with minor corrections, I was then given 3 months to make the necessary amendments. My external examiners, there were just 7 amendments that I had to make to my PhD Viva, and it was things like typos, cutting down chapters, inserting a table, just very like little things. I was able to make my changes in the space of 2 months, resubmit for them to be okay with the amendments that I made, and my external examiner came back to me in a week and she was happy with the changes that I made, and I was finally awarded my full PhD. So this is my story in a nutshell about my PhD Viva, my Viva corrections, how long it took me and that sort of thing. I really want to say that your PhD Viva is supposed to be an enjoyable experience. I want you to know that this is not a situation in which someone is trying to trick you or someone is trying to criticize you wrongfully or make you feel bad. This is literally you shining in your moment and in your intellectual power. So take that, know that your external examiners are on your side, and know that you are the person that knows your PhD inside out, and you got this. Nobody can tell you anything differently. You know what your research is saying, and stick to that and go bravely. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in another one. Love. Bye.